All right, everybody. Good afternoon. We've got another offensive coordinator candidate, and this one is a little bit spicy, right? This one's a little bit spicy, and in a weird way, it's spicy because it seems so boring. Like the fact that this hire would be viewed as dull and not creative and ultimately uninteresting is kind of what makes it interesting to discuss. It kind of goes so far in that direction of blandness and blah that it loops back around to being really kind of interesting because there is some there is some stuff going on here that I think as Seahawks fans we need to talk about, even if we might not necessarily come down on the side of wanting it. This video is powered by BetUS. Brian Schottenheimer. Brian Schottenheimer, if you know that name, it's because he's been with the Seahawks before. He was the offensive coordinator for 3 years from 2018 to 2020. Currently 51 years old, finishing a 3-year stint with the Dallas Cowboys. Of the famous Marty Schottenheimer lineage. I mean, we didn't fire him in 2020, but it was a mutual parting of the ways, right? We mutually agreed to part ways with Brian Schottenheimer. It would be a little bit odd to rehire him 5 years later, right? Or not even 5 years later. It would be, no, I think it would be 5 years now, but for any amount of time, you don't see things like that happen all that often. And I think Brian Schottenheimer got a reputation when he was in Seattle of being very dull and uninteresting and boring as a play caller, and that his firing, mutual parting of the ways, however you want to phrase it, was deserved. I'm not sure if that perception lingers on into present day. With what we've learned about Russell Wilson over the last 3 years, where he's mostly failed in other places in the NFL with other offensive minds and other coordinators and other coaches, maybe we're starting to learn that Brian Schottenheimer was doing what he was doing in Seattle because that was the only way to make it work with Russell Wilson at quarterback. And maybe he's capable of more if you gave him a quarterback that can do more traditional quarterback things, and that we shouldn't hold everything we didn't like about the 2018 to 2020 Seahawks offense against him. So let's take an earnest look at Brian Schottenheimer's career. It's a pretty long career, by the way. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer than I usually make these, but let's dig in here and try to understand Brian Schottenheimer's career. Last 3 years, he's been with the Cowboys. The last 2, he's been the offensive coordinator. Now, he does not call plays. He did not call plays for Dallas these last 2 years. That's Mike McCarthy. So there's some pieces of that offense that he owns, but there are also big pieces he doesn't. 2024, the Cowboys offense was bad. 21st in points, barely over 20.5 points a game. And they were bottom 4 in EPA, negative .089. Awful. But Dak got injured, and then they ended up cycling between mostly Cooper Rush, but also some Trey Lance at quarterback. And it's kind of hard to judge anything when that's going on. They had some other issues as well. I think, they lost Jake Ferguson for a couple games there. I think that they really couldn't find any receivers after CD, and they had no running backs to even really start the season. So you're not going to be good. And the previous year, Cowboys had one of the best offenses in the league. It was them and San Fran. 2023, the Cowboys averaged about 30 points a game, which was top in the league, .121 EPA, which is second in the league to San Fran. And Dak was the runner-up for league MVP in 2023. So something was cooking there, man. Something cooked. Maybe it was McCarthy, but that Cowboys offense is not loaded with incredible talent. Dak's a really good quarterback, but he's not an elite quarterback, right? CD Lamb's an elite wide receiver, but what else did they really have? Jake Ferguson's a decent tight end. Tony Pollard was a pretty good running back, but it wasn't some overwhelmingly talented offense that Schottenheimer just got to ride the coattails of. The year before that, he was a coaching analyst. I don't know what he did in that role, 2022, but Cowboys had a good offense again. They were fourth in points scored, 27.5. But Dak had a lot of interceptions this year, so it was .031 EPA per play, which was 10th. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about my friends over at BetUS. You can head on over there right now and not only utilize their sportsbook, but BetUS also has a casino. If you are into things like slots or live casino dealers for something like a blackjack, definitely head over to BetUS, utilize their online sportsbook, take advantage of the sign-up bonuses, 200% up to $5,000 or 250% for crypto sign-up bonus up to $5,000. So give BetUS's casino a look as well as their sportsbook. Give them a chance. Go get your free money and get to some gambling. Right. So the year before he got a 3-year stint in Dallas, spent 1 year in Jacksonville. Not really much to speak of here. Jacksonville was really bad in the 2021 season. Below average in passing yards, well below average. In fact, bottom 6 in dropback EPA per play, negative .061. This was the Trevor Lawrence rookie year, though. So that's bad. We are pretty familiar with what he did in Seattle from 2018 to 2020, but this bears repeating. 3 years, all 3 years, the Seahawks were top 9 in points and top 12 in EPA. They had 2 seasons where they were top 8 in points per game and top 7 in EPA per play. So these results are pretty hard to argue against. The reason why he got fired, you guys know what I'm talking about, is things broke down in the second half of the 2020 season, leading to a playoff loss that I think the team really felt like should not have happened because the offense was struggling so much, and they decided to make Schottenheimer the guy who owned that. And in hindsight, I think that we need to look at that situation differently. We need to look back at it and say, hey, wait a minute. Russell Wilson has really accomplished nothing of note in this league since that first half of 2020 when he was playing great. And the problems with a Russell Wilson-led offense have followed Russell Wilson. They haven't really followed Schottenheimer so much. Now, I would be concerned on whether or not Brian Schottenheimer could put together an offense that combats the modern-day defensive infatuation with cover 2 shell, just because that's what he mostly did here. And we haven't seen him call plays for an offense that doesn't heavily lean on that. But at the same time, I no longer think it's fair to blame Schottenheimer for the way 2020 ended. And even with the things that we blame him for, these results are objectively good. All right, so reaching back to before the 2018 hiring of Schottenheimer, he was a quarterback coach with the Indianapolis Colts for 2 years. One of those years, Andrew Luck was injured for the whole year. Jacoby Brissett played. 3,100 yards, 13 touchdowns, 7 picks. Ran for about 260, 59% completion, 82 QB rating. He was okay. It's Jacoby Brissett. You get what you get. You get tolerable play, and that's about it. 2016, he had Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck played well. 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, 13 picks, 63.5% completion, 96.5 rating. Ran for about 340. I mean, it's a good Andrew Luck season. Not his best, but at the same time, it is Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was good before Brian Schottenheimer got there. So I don't know how many people are going to be sitting there and saying that Brian Schottenheimer made Andrew Luck great. No, that's certainly not the case. Before then, he spent 1 year with the Georgia Bulldogs as the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, 2015. Georgia actually had a bad offense this year. They were 85th in the country, averaged about 36 points a game, little less than 26.5 points a game. And the quarterback was primarily Grayson Lambert, about 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 picks. Forgettable, but workable. He was efficient, I guess. He wasn't explosive. He gives you less than 200 passing yards a game, not much to say. And he wasn't a threat with his legs or anything. Before then, he got 3 years to run the Rams offense. And this was under Jeff Fisher, so he was the play caller. 2012 to 2014, those 3 years went 20.3 points per game, 21st. 21.8 points per game, 21st. 18.7 points per game, 25th. So bad to very bad. No really breakout years there in that bunch. In fact, it's kind of surprising he kept his job for 3 years. In the modern NFL, you probably wouldn't see that, especially for a team that isn't, I know the Rams went through some bad times in the mid to late 00s to the early to mid 10s, but you wouldn't expect a team that has higher aspirations to accept this. Before then, he was the offensive coordinator for the Jets for 6 years, and normally you would say, wow, he must have been doing great things with the Jets to get 6 years, but I mean, he was slightly above average in 2 years. He was slightly below average in 2 years. He was genuinely good 1 year and genuinely bad 1 year. So if you were to take the average of all that, he was about average. So again, I don't know how Schottenheimer kept his job for 6 years. It helped that the Jets were having some decent degrees of success. The Jets made the playoffs in 2006. They were going to make the playoffs in 2008, and then Brett Favre got hurt. And then Mark Sanchez back-to-back AFC title games. That's going to prop you up a little bit, but the best he ever did was the 25.3 points per game in 2008 with Brett Favre. It would have been a little better than that if Favre didn't get hurt at the end of the year, but he wasn't able to lead Mark Sanchez to the next level at quarterback. And, I mean, again, the body of work is approximately average. Now, before then, and we're going to keep going back here, I know at a certain point we've probably gone back too far to learn much, but I want to keep talking about this nevertheless because we the data we have is worth parsing through, even if we're only going to learn a tiny bit. Quarterback coach under his dad with the San Diego Chargers in 2002 to 2005. So this was the early Drew Brees era before he became a New Orleans Saint. And I mean, the Drew Brees experience was a little bit of a roller coaster, right? 2005, he was good, but not great. 3,600 yards, 24 touchdowns, 15 picks, 64.5 completion, 89.2 QB rating. It's not really up to Drew Brees standard. 2004 was the Drew Brees breakout year. They're a little less than 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, 7 picks, 65.5 completion, 104.8 rating. So, hey, that's good. I mean, especially for the era, that was actually really strong stuff. 2003, this was kind of the year where people started to think that Drew Brees just wasn't going to be able to figure it out at the NFL level. 2,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 67.5 rating. Doug Flutie actually probably played better in his limited time that year. 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4 picks, 82.8 rating, ran for about 170. And the first year Schottenheimer was there with Brees, 3,300 yards, 17 touchdowns, 16 picks. Workable for a young player. Tolerable, understandable for a player who was as young as Drew Brees was at that point. I think that was Drew Brees' second year in the league, and he did not really play at all as a rookie. So, pretty workable. Going back further, he was a quarterback coach for Washington, then the Redskins, 2001. I think this was under his dad as well. Tony Banks was the quarterback primarily, and I mean, it was not good. About not even 2,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, 10 picks, barely over a 53% completion, ran for about $150. Like, that's not something you're putting on your resume. Even for the era, it's not good. Spent a year at the USC as the Trojans. This was, of course, before Carroll. Tight ends coach in 2000. Anton Harris was the only notable tight end on that team. He gave you about 350 yards and 5 touchdowns for a pretty lackluster USC squad. Year before that, the Syracuse Orange wide receiver coach, 99. We are going way, way back here. And none of the receivers they had at that time are big names. Quentin Spotwood, Pat Woodcock, Malik Campbell, none of those guys did much. Woodcock led the way with 400 yards receiving. Spent a year as the Kansas City Chiefs assistant on their staff in 98. Chiefs had an average offense this year, 14th in the league, 20.4 points per game. Yes, back then, 20.4 points per game was actually slightly above average. Wild, I know. And then you go all the way back to his time as an assistant with the Rams, 1997. They averaged 18.7 points per game, which was 23rd. And that is the that is as far back as I can go with Schottenheimer without getting into stuff that really doesn't matter. So it's a full career, and he's done good things. Honestly, you could argue that the best work he's done was as the play caller and offensive coordinator in Seattle, where 3 straight top 9 offenses in scoring and top 12 in EPA. He got Russell Wilson in the MVP conversation all 3 of these seasons. What Russell Wilson was on the MVP shortlist for at least most of the year. He was able to do that with, I mean, he had good receivers, but they weren't anything over the top special, right? Like Doug Baldwin was right at the end of the line here. This was Lockett's probably peak ability as a football player, but Metcalf was a rookie in 2019, never really found a great tight end during this time after getting rid of Jimmy Graham. Disley kept getting hurt, and the offensive line was what it was. So there's actually, if you just want to look at the results, I know that people, when they dig deeper into Schottenheimer's precise methodology and the way in which he calls an offense and the way he puts an offense together, they don't really like what they see. But I'm looking at this and I'm going, he put the results on the table in a way that Waldron and Grubb could not match. So would you consider going back to the well that you thought was dry 4 or 5 years ago? And hey, what he's done in Dallas, it's been more good than bad, right? It's not like he's getting pushed out of Dallas because he was bad. He's getting pushed out because they're pushing out McCarthy, and they may as well push out his offensive coordinator as well. All right. So I will see you guys later today. There may be one more video. If not, I'll be on Twitch at some point. We're going to finish up me side. We're going to maybe do more Truck Simulator. We'll see. But either way, that's an interesting one. It just is. Because this is about the most experienced candidate we could get. And it's a candidate that has had success in Seattle before. But despite those two things, if we hired this guy, I fully expect that people would not particularly care for it, and it would be difficult for them to get excited about it. Let me know what you think down below, though. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you to BetUS for powering this video. See you guys later.